This battle just turned into an all-out war. After the trader sent out a bear and a bird, Luffy has chosen to counter this by releasing a cat and a giraffe. I'm honestly not quite sure how the type matchups work here, but it is still very exciting. Meanwhile, Zoro is stuck in a nightmare, currently facing off against almost all of his old enemies simultaneously. Also, Stella has been captured and is almost certainly not the traitor, and the biggest news of all is that we are about to dive into a conflict on Elbaf. Endgame One Piece is getting ridiculous in all of the best ways. And we are going to start with Zoro, because this chapter is like playing through an album of his greatest hits. In a weird fictional sciencey way, this chapter has incorporated almost all of Zoro's major series opponents. We have Mihawk in Seraphim form, who possesses the powers of Dar's Bones, next to an incarnation of Bartholomew Kuma. Technically, King is also represented, given that they've been spiced with Lunarian DNA. Also, Kaku is here, albeit as an ally. And you know what? Even Luffy counts as a Zoro opponent because they did fight that one time on Whiskey Peak. And this is the point where, look, if I was Zoro, I'd be going, all right, it's finally happened. My sense of direction is so bad that I've managed to lose my mind. And the craziest thing is, if we'd heard about this situation on paper even a year ago, it would have sounded like the cringiest fanfic imaginable. So Zoro's gonna fight a cyborg Mihawk who has the powers of both King and Dar's Bones. And also Kaku is going to be his ally. Out of context, it sounds bad. It sounds really bad. But in context, it sounds good. So damn good. And this is what separates the truly great writers from the people who also put words on pages. Because juggling all of these elements has no right to work anywhere near as well as it does. But Oda, much like an active teenager, relentlessly pulls it off with ease. But I love that most of these characters have nothing in common except for the demonic nexus that is Zoro. Mihawk, Dar's Bones, and Kaku, without Zoro, they may as well live in completely different series. So seeing everything converge on Zoro is so surreal, yet so amazing. Also, this video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends, the AAA game experience featuring hundreds of unique champions to engage in fight battling. And for some good old PvP, then you'll love fight battling in the arena. Build a team to fight against other players in a format where speed is king. But also don't forget to have a strong nuker on call, keep track of your team's aura, and don't forget to enact those delicious debuffs. And right now, love is in the air as new players can enjoy a special Valentine's Day themed adventure with Raid Love Quest. All you need to get involved is to download Raid, copy your in-game player ID, and then head to raidlovequest.plarium.com to play one of the Valentine's themed minigames for a chance to win some fantastic in-game and real-life prizes, including Valentine's Day themed raid champions and even Amazon gift cards worth up to $1,000. And if you're an existing player, then you can use this code to get a special small Valentine's Day gift just for you and everyone else who enters the code, but mostly you. Plus, new players use my link or scan the QR code right here and get a free starter pack with this cool in-game loot. So go do that thing, but for now it's back to you, me. Having mentioned it a couple of times now, yes, S-Hawk is a confirmed user of the Super Numi powers. I don't think this is a huge surprise. Most of us called this because it's a very natural power for a swordsman, very much turning him into a literal sword man, but also because Dar's Bones was imprisoned and impelled down, and so Vegapunk had clear access to his abilities. And I think this confirms that Vegapunk is more than likely able to replicate any Paramecia power from a Devil Fruit user who has been caught by the world government, which is, it's a lot, it's many, so many. And funnily enough, this means that Zoro is actually directly responsible for S-Hawk being this powerful, because if he didn't defeat Dar's Bones, then S-Hawk would not have this ability. The Zoro-Kaku team-up is also a very satisfying thing to see. As someone who caught up to the series during Enies Lobby, seeing these two together is very nostalgic, and in a strange way, it's like a very twisted Zoro and Sanji combination with Kaku's emphasis on kicking. Actually, you know what? It goes deeper than that, because this is what happens when you fuse Zoro, Sanji, and Usopp together. What you get is a long-nosed sword kicker, but I also loved the way that Luffy and Lucci teamed up. Although it was interesting to see that Luffy didn't elect to use Gear 5th, and at first I was like, look, what you doing, monkey man? Use the thing. Do it. Because theoretically, there should not be a reason to not use Gear Because theoretically, there should never be a reason to use a lower gear ever again. But then I remembered how tired Luffy was when talking to Zoro, and I imagine that that was a result of invoking Gear 5th. Thinking about it, Gear 5th is not at all an efficient form, because it has this effect where Luffy kind of gets high on freedom and mostly messes around with his opponents. I mean, yeah, he's basically invincible during this time, but it seems to be quite draining and there's no real way to min-max the form. As opposed to entering Gear 4th, which is a much more logical choice if you just need to deliver a quick smack in the sabos. Gear 4th is your daily business form. It's what you use when there is a thing that needs to be done and it needs to be done with no nonsense. Although in terms of storytelling, it's also because Oda doesn't want to go from 0 to 100 with this fight. Because looking at it, nobody uses their ultimate attacks or forms against the Seraphim yet. This really was more of a warm-up because there's no awakenings, no conqueror's haki, nothing really special happening at all. Despite the fact that we know all 4 of these characters are capable of some very special stuff. I will say though that the Luffy comedy was on point, especially when Kaku gave that death glare and was all like, yeah, I promise that we will put the handcuffs back on. And Luffy believing that obvious lie is the kind of joke that will get me every time. Meanwhile, Lucci took a different, much more honest approach to the situation, which surprisingly yielded the same result as Kaku's deception. He just bluntly said, yeah, after I'm done, I'm gonna kill you. Then I'm gonna brutally murder all of the 7 Vegapunks. Then I'm going to slowly dissect each and every one of your crew as they scream for help. Also Stussy, I'm gonna kill Stussy. And after hearing all of that, Luffy just responded with, yeah, sure, you can do that, cat man, if you can beat me, which you can't. And that smack talk right there did more damage than any physical attack Luffy will ever be capable of conjuring. I love the confidence of Luffy in this moment because his mind operates on this form of mental double jeopardy, which is the principle that you can't be legally tried for the same thing twice. So in Luffy's head, the case of Nico Robin versus Rob Lucci has been resolved. There's no going back into it. We've beaten the cat, now the cat must accept the judgment under the Sun God law, who is actually Sun God Luffy. Basically, Luffy no longer sees Lucci as a threat, which I imagine is probably going to annoy a lot of power scalers who really went all in on that their Lucci hype. However, the matter has been decided. And now Oda has begun this process of making both Lucci and Kaku much more likable. I mean, they were likable before, I really liked Kaku, but I mean that we're expanding them comedically, which generally means, we're friends now, you're not a threat to us anymore. And it's really working with me at the very least, because after this chapter, I did genuinely like both Lucci and Kaku a lot more. I also like the idea that Lucci's outburst makes sense retrospectively, and that may be the whole reason why he wasn't allowed to talk during his mission on Water 7, because the world government, they knew that he would say something stupid, so they assigned him the role of a mute. You are only allowed to speak via pigeon. And in this way, we're really now starting to showcase the similarities between both Luffy and Lucci, as well as Zoro and Kaku. The former two are very simple, desire-driven individuals, whilst the second in commands are the types who attempt to think, but still end up doing really dumb things anyway. They are absolutely perfect companions. And when the cuffs came off, my god, was I hit smack bang in the nostalgia balls. Because back during Enies Lobby, we actually had the opposite situation, where Zoro and Usopp were cuffed and they were at the mercy of Kaku and Jabra. But now, the situation is flipped, with Kaku and Lucci being cuffed and at the mercy of 2 other big animal-y things. And I had a similar reaction to their cuffs coming off as I did with Zoro back in the day, which was a moment of uncontrollable hype, which only continued further seeing their attack panels, especially Luffy and Lucci, because both of them used former ultimate attacks, the Rokogun and the Kongun. And at certain stages in the series, those used to be the ultimate attacks for both of them, but now they are the base attacks. I also thought it was quite sweet when Luffy apologized to Bonnie before hitting Esper, despite the fact that Bonnie isn't actually there. It's just one of those pure Luffy moments where he's so emotionally in tune with those around him that he knows the effect his actions are going to have. Sort of like an emotional future sight, I suppose, because Bonnie is also our friend now. And actually, it reminds me a lot of when Mihawk apologized to Shanks during the Paramount War before he attacked Luffy. In general though, I really love the situation that's been set up, because One Piece now has a bit of a problem that its main characters are so stupidly powerful. Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji are now world-class combatants, so it's really hard to amp up the stakes when dealing with them, because almost nothing is an actual threat to them. But the genius thing that Oda's done here is spreading them too thin. Yes, whoever is with Luffy and Zoro, they'll probably be fine, but they can't protect everyone. As powerful as they are, they can't be everywhere at once and keep like 15 other people safe. So the tension comes from the need to problem solve. What do we do? How do we logistically make all of this work before our friends die? That sort of stuff. Speaking of, we do hear Nami in this chapter, although we don't see her, and I imagine that her group is being attacked by S-Shark, since he was the only Seraph that we don't currently know the location of. That, or maybe Nami ran into Carabo, and it's more of a comical scream, and eek, get away from me, swamp man. Or maybe it's even something else. We still know so little about the traitor and what other things might be in their traitorsome service. We do know one new thing though, which is that Stella is all but clear of any traitorous allegations, having been captured and imprisoned. I mean, sure, I guess it could be a very long con, but I don't think that One Piece is that type of series. The situation seems to be more like the traitor thwacked Stella in the head whilst Bonnie Bonnie was in Kuma's memories. Then Bonnie's powers wore off and Stella turned back into his old man self. But one important thing here is definitely the missing Cypherpol agents featured imprisoned as well, because this is going back to the missing cells that Lucci flagged a while ago, which we've covered, but I'll say again, almost certainly means that the traitor has been traitorizing for at least 2 months now. So I don't think it's anyone who's a recent addition to Egghead Island, by which I'm mostly referring to Saint Saturn, because a lot of people seem to be really on board with the idea that the silhouette monster is him due to vague shapes. I don't think so though. I think it has to be a satellite or maybe even a hidden 8th Vegapunk. The most suspicious candidate to me is still Shaka, and this chapter did very little to alleviate that, especially when Shaka allowed Lucci and Kaku to be released, the former of which quite literally stated that he was going to kill all of the Vegapunks. So if I was some sort of science traitor and I wanted all of my Vegapunk comrades dead, then releasing an assassin ordered to kill my Vegapunky friends would seem like quite an efficient way to accomplish that. Although Shaka's actions were disguised as giving Luffy the choice. But Shaka, look, he's a pretty smart dude. Smart enough to allegedly see the logical pathway through to his own death. Shaka knew that Luffy would free Lucci, so I think it may have been a very calculated choice to give Luffy the key. And here's the big thing, when Shaka gave Luffy the key, he just said, you do you, bruh, do whatever. You make the choices. Just please make sure to protect Stella. Not protect the other Vegapunks. They don't matter. Only Stella. The others can die. I don't know, I could be reading far too much into this, but right now I am really invested in Shaka doing the bad thing for the purpose of the overall good of protecting Stella. Because the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and Shaka is the literal personification of good intentions. So the road to hell is going to be paved with Shaka. We also have 2 more key pieces of information though. The first is that a whopping 100 marine ships are currently on their way to Egghead Island. 100 ships. To put that into some perspective, a Buster Call consists of only 10 ships. So this could be like 10 Buster Calls. Granted, not all of the vessels are going to be battleships, but it is still a massive fleet. In fact, we've not seen a marine fleet this big in the series ever. Even during the Paramount War, we didn't see many ships because it was more of a land-based affair. So we are in some pretty serious trouble here. And the second nugget drop is that Vegapunk has also been conducting poneglyph research, very much emphasizing the Ohara 2.0 situation happening here. And he may very well be that final key we're looking for to discover the location of the 4th road poneglyph. However, that issue may currently also be being litigated elsewhere, because we have a clash on Elbaf. Redhead Shanks versus similarly redhead Kid is happening, and this comes with so many revelations, familiar characters, and things I guarantee many of you overlooked in the chapter, so we're going to be diving into all of that in the next video.